Good morning, everyone. Our program will start in the sanctuary at 10:45. See you in here. Thank you.
All right, let's see if I can get my computer to wake up here. It's a little sleepy.
It's awake.
It's awake.
It's where?
Sanctuary.
Oh, I was just coming to get my things to move up.
Well, the sun is starting to encroach. I was hoping it wouldn't be too bad. I guess I can see it. Most of the side. Actually, that's not too bad.
Not too bad? Okay.
It's bad, but not too bad.
We'll take it, huh?
Cutting through, pardon me.
No worries. Does that look okay? All right, good stuff. Just gonna go through, see if the videos work. I can hear it from my computer, but it's not. I guess I could try. setting. Yeah, sorry. Okay.
Yeah. Just gotta change that.
Well, we didn't test the other day. So what you can do, where's the speaker on this thing? Is it close enough that you can just bend this mic down
We could do that.
and do that? That's the only thing I can
It's
suggest.
right here. Oh wow. I hear myself.
Turn up the volume, drive
Output.
it, go, and then
Here we go.
get the mic down.
It should work now.
Here, let's try.
Is it up on?
It should work. If it's not working, so I'm just going to use the mic. Is it,
Well, I mean, is the audio, the mixer, is it turned up on the HDMI?
this should be testing. That's on. This should play, but it's not playing, so I don't know how I can.
Or I mean,
I'm sorry.
on the mixer, the HDMI output, is that one turned on? Because the mic is on.
Yeah, the HMI, otherwise you wouldn't see the picture.
Oh, for the audio.
I know. The audio should come through the HDMI, so I don't know why it's not. Just a Mac.
Yeah.
Try up here under system preferences.
I don't know, Fer, can you just bend it down? Just bend it down. Can you change this setting back then because it's not playing at all right now?
Yeah.
Go up to system preferences and let's just look at sound under system preferences and see what we.
Yeah. It's now it's on the crest now. Is that the speakers? So I think what the problem is from up there, it might not be.
Got it on as much as I know how to turn it on.
Oh, is that true?
It should be connected. Well, let me try something else.
We'll just double check if it's on that way. What we'll do is we'll just point the microphone.
Okay.
We'll just get a point.
And then you can turn this on. I don't know if you can play from this. It's probably better if you go through that. Just put it up close to where we're it'll be loud enough. Sorry. I don't know why it's not working.
I think it's one of those you just got to turn it off.
I played music from my laptop before on this thing where it just works, so I don't know why it's not working.
Okay, well, thank you anyway. All right. Are you ready? Are y'all both ready? All right, folks, we will be gathering up here at the front to get started with the workshop. So if you are down over there to my right, if you could make your way to the pews, that would be lovely. Thank you. So I'll let you open this. I'll let you open
Okay.
this up however you want.
I'll take it from here. All right, good morning. I'm Lee Lemcool, member of the church. I know a lot of you. So I'll sort of open this up. Back in the fall of 2019, Reverend Jackie connected me with Dr. Eric Wallace, Associate Dean for the Colorado Springs branch of the University of Colorado School of Medicine. Now, Dr. Wallace was forming a team dedicated to reducing the frequency of suicide by firearm in El Paso County. Sadly, we lead the state in this category. I joined his team, which became the Firearm Safety Work Group, and the program today is one of the many results. Thanks to Maddi and Fer for pursuing and receiving a grant which allowed them to create this program and build significantly on our work. And as I said in my blurb in the church-wide email, firearm owners and non-owners alike can participate in reducing the scourge of suicide by firearm by focusing on and having productive conversations about safe storage. I am a poster child. Many of you know I'm a gun owner. I joke that I'm one of 2 NRA Life members in the congregation. There used to be 3 before Rusty left us for First Press. When I joined Eric's team, I had loaded unsecured handguns in a variety of places in my home, plus a loaded shotgun under the bed. The rest of my firearms were in a beautiful handcrafted gun cabinet with glass panels in the doors. Any 10-year-old with a big rock could be in that cabinet in no time. My work group experience showed me that I needed to change my approach to firearm storage. I now have securely locked metal gun cabinets in place of that beautiful piece of furniture, and along with 2 keypad-activated handgun safes, examples of which you'll see out here. The topic of safe storage can be a difficult one to broach effectively. As a firearm owner, I can say that if your approach to the topic implies that you can't understand why I even need those things, or so many of them, or certain types of them, the conversation will be less likely to have your desired impact. Among other things, this program will give you tools and words to raise this topic with the parents of your grandchildren, or the parents of your young children's friends in such a way that you may have a productive conversation. I love this church and this congregation. I'm passionate about this topic, so please consider me your personal resource in this area. I'm glad to discuss it with you anytime. Thanks for being here. Over to Maddi and Fer.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you for introducing us. Obviously, you know, I don't come here too often. Maddi and I are students here at Colorado College. Maddie's down that way. But we're usually much too busy on the block plan to come on down to church. Well, before we get started, I did want to let everyone know that, and I'm sure you know already, but we will be talking about heavy topics today. And if you feel the need that you need to step out, feel free. I'd also want to let you all know we were a little bit late because the food was a little bit late, but that just means it's fresh, right? So after the workshop, feel free to go grab some, and don't forget to register for a drawing of a safe at the end of this. Well, my name is Fer, or Fer, that's spelled F-E-R, and that is Maddi over there. We are best friends, and we started this project in November of 2021. We worked together to get a fund from the Davis Projects for Peace, and so that's what we are taking advantage of now. Today we're going to be talking about several things, but let me just walk through everything that we're going to talk about with you today. We wanted to mention that we're going to be talking about a personal story given by our beloved Pete Lizer, and then we're going to be talking about some statistics from the coroner's report from last year, 2021. It just got released, and so these statistics are fresh and not very different from last year's, but fresh nonetheless. Then we were going to transition into the connection between suicide prevention and safe storage, including what options you all have if you have any firearms, or if you don't own any yourself, what options your friends and loved ones may have to store your firearms safely. And finally, we're going to open up the room for everyone to try out these safes, cable locks, and other accessories that we can use, and for everyone to have a little bit of brunch. So the first thing we're going to show is Pete's story. And now, Pete, would you like to come up and talk at all, or give an introduction?
What's that? No. Must be the, okay. Good morning. My name is Pete Leiser, and I am a suicide loss survivor ×2. What I am not is a professional speaker. I don't do this for a living. I'm not a licensed mental health provider. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a doctor. I'm coming to you today as I was a dad, and I was a husband. So now during these workshops, you're going to get see a lot of slides that are going to have a lot of statistics on them, a lot of numbers, a lot of data that is probably going to be pretty staggering to you. And, you know, when I look at these numbers and I look at this data and I look at these slides, I see something different. I see my son, Kyle, and I see my wife, Melanie. Kyle, he was my 14-year-old son. Probably like most of you about your kids, a father's dream. Tons of friends, great student, just great kid. He was a hockey player, and a pretty good one. And I don't know if any of you remember the first time the Avalanche won the Stanley Cup back in '95, and I always told him that he has a little bit of Peter Forsberg in him. So basically, he was my world. Melanie, she was my second wife, full of life and fire. She believed in me. She pushed me. I'm sure some of you guys out there probably know that feeling, to have a partner beside you to push you and believe and get you to do things kind of out of your comfort zone and everything like that. So yeah, she was my best friend, and yeah, she was my trophy wife. I guess maybe a little background, kind of bring you into this. Kyle, like I told you, he was a hockey player. We lived back in Kansas City area, back in Missouri, where all this took place with my son. His team, got into basically the finals to his league tournament, and this game went into a shootout, and he was one of the top 3 players, so he got selected to be one of the skaters. Actually, the last skater. And I guess the reason I tell you this story, or tell you any story about me, is because when you are a suicide loss survivor, that's all you have left. You have memories, and you have the grief that goes along with it. So anyway, I relive this all the time. And the shootout went down to it was tied. It got to my son as the last skater. I'm on the bench, running the penalty box, and all I see is my son at center ice, and then he starts skating just nonchalantly, almost like in slow motion, stick handling, gets close to the net, pulls the puck left, quickly pulls it back right, and then with a flick of the wrist, buries it top net over the goalie's left shoulder. His bench, all these kids, all his teammates just erupt. And all I see is my son out on center ice with his hands down, just like this, just shrugging. And all his friends just jumped over the bit railing and tackled him at center ice. I relived that moment countless times over the last 5 years. I actually have his hockey stick next to me in my car that I can grab when I just need a moment. So, I guess in regards to what it has to do with this workshop and where am I going with this, my family, we were really into recreational shooting. Gun owner, actually carried for a while. Really focused, my main focus with my kids and my wife was focusing on gun safety and safe handling and basically respect of that firearm and all firearms. And actually, I thought I did a pretty good job. I thought I did a pretty good job up to the point where my guns weren't locked up. They weren't laying around loaded, but they weren't locked up. I had trust. And I had no reason not to trust. One of the worst days of my life, actually the worst day of my life, April 23rd, 2017, about 11 p.m. Gunshot. From my son's room. AR-15, 223 rifle. I'm sure you've heard about those on the news a lot. And I walked in and opened that door, and all I saw was my son sitting on the bed and gone. The thing about this is that, in the days leading up to this, there were no signs of any struggles or anything was wrong. There was no breakup or no issues. My son wasn't showing anything. He wasn't talking about ending his life. He wasn't having any issues. Everything was fine. And I think that's the biggest thing one of the biggest things I'm trying to get across to you, because you're going to hear a lot here coming up next about watching for and seeing the signs of suicide. And don't get me wrong, you need to pay attention to that, and that's why you're here. But I'm here to tell you, sometimes there are no signs. There's a big thing about mental health right now, mental health issues and things. Neither my wife or my son were diagnosed with any mental health issues. The person in our family who's got the mental health issues and the diagnosis is me. So I guess what In regards to safe storage, basically, just because. If you follow safe storage practices, just for that one moment that a loved one, a family member, a friend who has been trained and used firearms in the past has a moment of lapse in judgment, a bad day. If you have that firearm stored and secured, you make that not a viable option for them to use. And another thing is you make them pause, you make them think. And you put some time between them struggling and whatever issue they have and that firearm. Because sometimes you just don't know. And I'm here to tell you, I didn't know. But I said I was a survivor. And that's what I do. And that's what you do, is you survive. Like I said, it did happen to me twice. I'll just briefly mention this. June 21st, 2019, here in Colorado Springs. My second wife, she took my 9mm, went to the base of Pulpit Rock Park, and made that decision. So this is what I do to try to make sense of it all and make their lives have meaning as I try to do this. Granted, I don't speak very well. I tend to ramble and everything like that. But just want to share my story with you, so hopefully you don't have to experience what I've experienced. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Pete, once again for sharing that. It's a heavy story and not very easy to share, so really thank you sincerely. We wanted to talk a little bit about why we're having this conversation here in El Paso. You might think that El Paso County in Colorado is just like any other county, but in reality, that's not entirely true. We're going to be talking about some statistics that are taken from the coroner's report. And we have this QR code up here if you want to scan it. It'll take you directly to the coroner's report. And I didn't know what that was a year ago, and so I'll let y'all know in case you're in the same boat. The coroner's report is just a report of all deaths that are investigated by the coroner's office. That includes things like suicide. And so that's why we're going to be going over these facts, because these are just, facts that are fact-checked and reliable in our community. So the first one is that the prevalence of suicide in El Paso County is quite large. In 2021, there was 176 deaths by suicide in our county, and suicide and homicide themselves together make up almost a quarter of the deaths investigated by the coroner's office. And unfortunately, the number of suicides from 2020 to 2021 was nearly the same, and both of which were about 3 times as much as the number of homicides. So what's the relationship between suicide, homicide, and firearms? Well, in both suicides and homicides, firearms played a very significant role. As you could imagine, something that is very small and very powerful is very effective as a weapon. 2021 data reveals that about 65% of all the deaths by suicide involved a firearm. It goes to show how effective a firearm can be when one is trying to take their own life. And lastly, there were more deaths by suicide involving firearms than any other lethal means combined. And that's, an example of that is up here on the screen with that diagram. If you're a visual person like me, that statistic is really powerful, right? The number of deaths by suicide is more than any other combined. That's way too much. I'm going to show you all a video about firearm safety and suicide prevention here. So here it goes.
Gun ownership, whether it be for protection, hunting, or sport, is part of our culture here in El Paso County.
We are proud to live and serve in this community where so many active duty military, first responders, and veterans protect our American values.
We support and protect your Second Amendment right to own firearms.
While we live in one of the best cities in the country, we are sad to know that too many people in our community are dying by suicide.
In fact, more residents die by suicide involving a firearm than from homicides and motor vehicle accidents combined. In addition, more people die by suicide using firearms than all other suicide methods combined.
Suicide is often a result of a temporary crisis. And once it passes, you or your loved one's risk of death by suicide drops dramatically. And a firearm is far more deadly than any other method used to attempt suicide.
Many people believe when someone who wants to die because of suicide will do so regardless whether or not they have access to a firearm. The truth is, 90% of people who survive a suicide attempt do not go on to die by suicide later in life.
In other words, people are much more likely to survive a suicide attempt if they do not have access to a firearm while in crisis.
The good news is that there are ways to protect your family. Suicide is preventable. As a community, we all have a responsibility to care for one another.
Do you know someone who is struggling?
Feeling hopeless, trapped, or in physical or emotional pain.
Are they increasing their alcohol or drug use?
If so, express your concern and ask directly if they're thinking about suicide.
Asking won't put the idea in their head. Listening to them and accepting their feelings without judgment can save their life. That might be all it takes to get them to the next steps of help and support.
Having conversations with your friends and loved ones about suicide includes talking about safe firearm storage.
Gun ownership, whether it be for protection or for sport, is your right as a citizen. With that comes responsibilities. It's our job to protect this community. We need your help.
Help us ensure the safety of your loved ones by storing firearms in a gun safe, keeping them locked, or storing them voluntarily and temporarily outside the home.
Remember, there is always hope. It's our duty as a community and citizens to help the people and each other that are struggling to find the light and find the hope. The following suicide prevention resources are available in our community. On behalf of all the first responders, we thank you.
It's a pretty good video, and it has a lot of statistics. It's up on the websites here that are up there if you want to watch it again or share it at any point. One last thing before I pass it off. I just, want to say, a lot of us aren't necessarily very involved with firearms. Like Lee said, there's only maybe a couple of you who may be involved with firearms. But that doesn't mean that, this workshop is entirely irrelevant. I'm sure we all have friends, family, and loved ones that are involved with firearms. And if not, we all are certainly involved with our mental health. And that is a great segue into this next part of our presentation, where we have a representative. I'll let you introduce yourself, from the Pikes Peak Suicide Prevention Partnership. Tell us a little bit about what we should know about suicide prevention.
Hello, everyone. My name is Caitlin. I am from Pikes Peak Suicide Prevention Partnership. We are a local nonprofit that is actually right up the street on North Tejon. So if you ever need any resources or just don't know where to go, we're a great place to start. So I want to thank you all for being here today, and I also just want to give another thank you to Pete for sharing his story. It's just such a powerful message to hear. So I want to talk a little bit about why Pikes Peak Suicide Prevention is committed to providing as many sort of free suicide prevention trainings as possible. So there was at one point in our human history where a lot of people were dying from appendicitis. And so these doctors had this idea that if we could just get the information out to the public of what the warning signs are, maybe we could save lives. And it did, it worked. Right? If you're having this really sharp pain on the right side of your abdomen, we know that that might be appendicitis and it might be a life-threatening situation, and we know that we need to go to the hospital. And so we kind of view suicide prevention training in the same way, of if we can equip people with this basic knowledge of what the warning signs are, what to look out for, we can possibly save lives. And so that's what we're going to touch on today. So we've already kind of touched on some of these things, and I don't want to be redundant, but year after year, El Paso County leads the state in deaths by suicide, and we are by no means the largest county in the state of Colorado. So that's just something to be aware of. We know that when somebody survives a suicide attempt, they report experiencing immediate regret, and the vast majority of people will not go on to die by suicide. And one death by suicide negatively impacts an average of 115 other people. It's that ripple effect that you hear about. And losing somebody close to you to suicide increases your risk of also dying by suicide. And so we view prevention and postvention as kind of the same thing. So a couple more statistics. The average age of a person who dies by suicide is 44 years old. That's a little misleading because we have people, unfortunately kiddos as young as 10 and 11, and then all the way up until later in life. And so that's just something to keep in mind when looking at that statistic. 30% of deaths by suicide involve prior or active military duty service members. Obviously, we live in a very military-heavy population, so that is sometimes talked about, maybe one of the reasons why El Paso County has so many deaths by suicide. And 81% of all people who died by suicide were men. Common risk factors include relationship issues, financial stress, substance abuse, chronic health issues, grief, and legal issues. So let's talk a little bit about why people die by suicide. I don't think that we have enough information to really answer that question. But a theory by this man named Thomas Joyner, he's a doctor, he lost his father to suicide and has spent his life sort of, researching the subject, is that these three components have to come together in order for a person to die by suicide. So this perceived burdensomeness, right? People get to a point where they legitimately believe that the people in their lives will be better off if they are not here, which is very unfortunate to hear. Low belonging and social isolation is a really, really, really key factor in suicide ideation. I work as a therapist at Pikes Peak Suicide Prevention. I don't think I have a single client right now who isn't struggling with feeling lonely and not having a community that they feel like they can belong to. And then the ability to enact lethal self-injury. When we think about suicide, I think part of what makes it so scary is that it really goes against our biology of staying alive, right? You're hiking on that trail and you round the corner and there's a bear. Your body flips on your fight or flight system before you can even form a rational thought, right? There's these systems that are built to keep us alive and survive. And in order for a person to attempt or complete suicide, they have to get comfortable with a plan. And that's why I really love the way Pete phrased creating a pause. I think the thing I hear most often when I talk about safe firearm storage is that question of, well, if you take a gun away, aren't they just going to find another way to die by suicide? I think that that's a fair question to ask. But the point is that the gun is so lethal, it doesn't give us any time to intervene with the mental health resources that are necessary to help that person. And so yes, a person might find another way that they would want to die by suicide, but it kind of puts them back at this square one of coming up with a plan and having enough time to get comfortable carrying out that plan. And so again, the idea is to really remove that lethal access so we have time to get to that person and get them the help that they need. So let's talk about things to look out for. I completely agree with Pete. I think, unfortunately, there are cases where there aren't a whole lot of signs, or maybe there are no signs. I think that it's still beneficial to know what to look out for. So when we talk about verbal signs, most of the time people aren't walking up to their friends and saying, I'm thinking of dying by suicide. That would make it really easy, right? If people just said that, and then we could get them to the help that they need. Oftentimes you will hear people say things like, I just feel so tired, I don't know what I'm gonna do, I just wish I didn't wake up this morning. Things like that are all kind of key indicators that that person is struggling. Sometimes people will start saying goodbyes, right? If you have a friend who comes up to you and says, Kate, I just want you to know that you've been such a good friend and I love you and I just wanted you to know that. If that's not how that person usually says goodbye to you, you should probably ask a couple of questions, right? Sometimes statements like, well, pretty soon I won't have to worry about that is a really big one as well. Some behavioral things to look out for. Decreased hygiene, change in sleeping patterns, risk-taking behaviors, increased substance abuse. If a person has attempted suicide in the past, that infinitely increases their risk of dying by suicide in the future. If they're stockpiling guns or pills, things like that, making really weird statements on social media. I always tell people, if you know somebody and you see that they're not acting the way that they usually are, check in on your friend, right? It doesn't mean that they're necessarily thinking about suicide, but I think it's worth asking. And then situational things, I think, are some of the biggest things to look out for, right? If somebody's just lost their job, they're going through a divorce or a breakup, they've just lost a loved one, maybe they've done something and they're fearing punishment, they've gotten a chronic health diagnosis, any sort of personal embarrassment, humiliation, things like that. I always say, if you have a friend who just went through a breakup and is struggling to pay rent, you should probably be checking in on that friend, right? And so just some things to look out for. And so if you're in a situation where somebody, you ask the question, are you thinking about suicide? Has that crossed your mind? And I do encourage you to ask that question very bluntly. I know that it's a taboo subject still, right? Even saying the word suicide, it just feels taboo, and it shouldn't be. But what I often hear is people will ask it in a roundabout way, are you thinking of hurting yourself? It's too vague. You need to ask specifically if they're thinking about suicide. And if they say yes, we need to get that person connected to support services immediately. We want to increase their connectedness to the people in their life, and we need to create an ongoing support plan to make sure that that person's safe, right? And that includes removing access to lethal means. I always tell people, on a normal day, can most of us handle the responsibility of owning a firearm safely? Yeah, I think most of us can. But I want you to think about the worst day of your life. Think about how distressed you were on that day, Think about what your problem-solving skills were like on that day, or your judgment on that day. I don't think any of us should have access to a firearm on one of our worst days. And so this slide is just a bunch of suicide prevention resources. So at the end of that video, you did see the Colorado Crisis Services. There's a phone number and a text line that is available 24/7. It is free and it is confidential. Any individual in the state of Colorado can call or text that line at any time of the day or night, and they will be answered by a trained specialist who will know what to do. There's also the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. I don't know if you guys have heard about this. They recently rolled out 988. The goal, I think, eventually is to, when you're a kid and you're in school and there's a fire or danger, you're trained to call 911. And it's a very easy number to remember. And so we want mental health crises to be viewed in the same way of, we know the exact number to call to connect that person to the resources that they need. Safe to Tell is a program where you can anonymously make a report about somebody you might be worried about, and a mental health professional will follow up with that person. There is the Lighthouse Walk-In Crisis Center at 115 South Parkside Drive. If you are with somebody and they are visibly in a mental health crisis and they agree, that Walk-In Crisis Center is open 24/7, and they will be evaluated and taken care of, and that is just a great resource to have. Obviously, Pike Peak Suicide Prevention is a great resource as well. Like I said, we're just right up the street off of Tejon. We're there Monday through Saturday. If you just don't know where to start, or if you're worried about somebody, we've got free therapy, free support groups, free suicide prevention trainings, basically anything that you can think of. And then the Suicide Prevention Collaborative of El Paso County is a great resource as well, and they have their own website. So I know that was a lot of information, and so if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or if you want to come chat with me after, I'm happy to answer any questions then. But like I said, thank you for sticking around for this presentation. I know it's not a fun thing to talk about on a beautiful Sunday morning, but this is our community, and these deaths by suicide are happening in our community, and they're happening far too often, and especially with firearms. So thank you for sharing your time with me today, and yeah, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I think when we say like change of time management, if you have like I'm a very type A person. I am not the type of person to not turn in a work assignment on time. And say you're my boss and I suddenly start like really slipping up on a lot of stuff. Again, it doesn't necessarily absolutely mean I'm thinking about suicide, but it probably means that something's off. And so I think it warrants a check-in. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much. That was a very it's a shortened version of what a lot of trainings would look like. So if you're interested in some more of that, feel free to, visit down the road on Tejon. Next, we're going to be talking about what is firearm safe storage and why is it important. And to do that, we're going to have Officer Sid Santos come on up here and talk to us about that. No, Sid, I have this one.
Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah, so I can take a glance, so I'm not turning my neck too much there. How do I change the slides? Just spacebar? All right. Good morning. I'll just introduce myself real quick. I'm Officer Sid Santos. I'm with the Colorado Springs Police Department. I've been a police officer for 25 years. Briefly, my experience with this issue before I talk about the safes themselves. As a police officer, I have lost friends to suicide, police officers. Regrettably, like she was saying, on the worst of days, not to have a gun. Regrettably, we carry a gun with us every day, everywhere we go while we're working. Most of us have guns at home. And I also have had the experience of a child who's attempted to kill herself. Thankfully for myself and for her, she attempted to hang herself, but could not effectively do that. but if she had access to a gun, I think she would have been much more effective in doing that. So thankfully for me, all of my firearms were secured and not available at the time. So obviously, we've already discussed all the reasons for the safety of the storage there. Okay. So with this, accessibility is one of the biggest things that you would have to think about with firearms, especially for somebody who's suicidal. I do have people who've talked to me who say, well, no, I want to have that gun right next to me, right at my dresser, so if somebody breaks into my house, and I hear what they're saying. But when you look at the statistics of crime versus suicide within, well, anywhere, but especially here, what's more likely to occur? Somebody break into your house and commit a crime against you, or you as an individual who has access to a gun using it to harm yourself? Well, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but it's pretty easy to look up and see what the numbers are here in the city of Colorado Springs and in El Paso County. Okay, so the current laws on safe storage, and I think these were renewed or updated last year in 2021. You have to have the gun secure from juveniles from them accessing. Obviously, if you're a handgun owner, you want to take your juvenile to go shooting. They can't access that, but then there's immediate adult supervision while they're in connection with those guns. So if you're in a household, whether it's you have children, grandchildren, friends who are going to come over, those weapons need to be secured. If you do have your gun stolen, whether it's, I would say, from your home, or some of you might be surprised if it's from your car. We have an unusually large amount of guns that are stolen from cars in the city of Colorado Springs. I was on light duty for 5 months because of a knee injury, so I took reports over the phone, and it was amazing how many times I take the report. My car was broken into, they stole my wallet that I left in the car. Oh yeah, and my gun. That doesn't make any sense to me. So having it secure, whether it's at home or wherever you might be, is very important. But if it does get lost or stolen, or you realize, oh, I thought I had it in the safe, but I don't know where it is, you do need to report it minimally as a lost or stolen item so that the serial number can go into the system, and if somebody's contacted with that, then it can, then the law enforcement will be aware of that. Yes, ma'am. So the question was, is it legal to have a gun in your car? Yes, in the state of Colorado, you can have, well, like I have right here where I have my gun on my hip, you can do that. It used to be where you couldn't conceal it inside your car, but now the laws have changed, so you can have it inside your vehicle. I would say you want to have it with you so that you're, not going to lose it that way. But I do know that some people have, and I've seen some where they have the lock boxes mounted to their vehicle for short-term type of things. So there are certain locations that you cannot go into with a gun. Certain facilities, but also, say for example, if there was a rule here at this church that says there's no guns inside the church, and I don't know what the rules are here, that's not a violation of law. But if you see somebody and say, hey, you have a gun, you're welcome here, but your gun's not welcome here, so they either have the choice to leave or to secure their gun outside of where they're at. Throwing it in your glove compartment or underneath your seat is not securing it. All right. I don't have my reader, so I have to pay attention to what's here. Okay, so the simplest and does everybody have these? Okay, so these are available at the desk. I'm trying to walk away. These are the most easily accessible locks for you to have. No, that's okay. There is a video that will show the examples on a shotgun, but these will go through a handgun just like mine. Great way to keep it secure, but not very secure. Small children will have difficulty, manipulating this, then going to get a magazine, which I would say then you need to keep your magazine, your ammunition separated from it if you want to keep this to be the most effective. But minimally, if you have this in your home, I would recommend that you use this if you have nothing else accessible to yourself. Very inexpensive, or these actually are free. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, so the question was, do firearms, people who are selling firearms need to provide a safety mechanism? This is what they're going to provide. So this is, again, the minimal, so you'll either get one when you get the gun. These are free, so if you want to grab one today, if you have one, I would say one for every weapon. I do have a shotgun. It's an old bolt-action shotgun. I actually take the bolt out and put the bolt in my safe, so it can't be used in any way, shape, or form that way. Firearms case, most handguns will come with a case when you purchase them, unless you purchase them used. Again, it's something kind of like this. It's a plastic case that's going to be based off of the size of the gun, and there's little holes on it designed for you to put a padlock on it. At least one, but some of them will have two. It's only a plastic case, so it's going to be very easy to get into if you're trying. Again, if you're trying, you're going to get into this. It's just going to take you some time to get in there. Probably prevent a very small child from entering that, but somebody who's a teenager who can process through it can bypass that pretty quickly. And then, of course, having a safe is going to be your best option. Of course, the most expensive. I have two safes. I don't know how much they cost. I'm sure they were pricey when I purchased them. But again, the importance to me of keeping the gun away from people who shouldn't have it was very important to me. And I also have the benefit of somewhere to keep my passports, my birth certificate, Social Security card, those types of things. All right. Temporary voluntary safe storage sites. The police department used to, and in emergency situations will take them, but generally speaking, we would prefer not to unless it's an emergency situation. So these right here, these are all going to, well, most of these will be gun stores of some sort. You can go on, I actually went to the website, the Colorado Firearms Safety Coalition. Most of them are firearms stores, dealers, that will provide a location for you to keep those if you don't have a way to secure those. So, for example, if you do have somebody who's in your home that is, I guess, suicidal, homicidal, or anything like just particularly angry at a point in their life, they will take them. You'd have to speak to them as far as how long they're willing to store that, or what you would need to do to store it beyond that particular amount of time. I do have a benefit. It's nice with the police department. They have allowed us to store our guns in our lockers at work because the police facility is pretty secure. It's nice for me to be able to put most of my small firearms in there so that I don't actually have to worry about, whether it's going in or out of the safe, if I'm getting in there for something else. So I do have that. There may be some other options for you, but consider that if that's something that you want to do there. All right, let's see if I can. So this will be an example on I got it to work yesterday. Okay. All right. Okay, and if you have questions, it's something that we can show you more directly up there. It's a pretty simple process. You got the basic key that goes in there. So almost like a bike lock. Very simple concept. So if you can see, it might be difficult from back there, but you just place this through, and a handgun, you put this through the magazine well. Whoa. You put this through the magazine well, you wrap it back around, and then you lock it so that the magazine can't go in, the slide can't go all the way forward. All right, so that's very simple. As far as rifles or shotguns, as long as you go through so that the firing pin can't go all the way forward onto anything, this is what's going to happen. So if you have any questions, feel free to talk to me afterwards, and I'll show you how those work. Oh, it's thinking. Well, we'll skip over that then. It's only a minute and a half long. All right. No. Oh, would you? Okay, so Fer is going to show you or discuss the safes. I will say the safe that I have is very similar to a lot of the ones that they have there. My original one is a keypad one, which is a very slow access one. It's secure, but if I wanted to get into it and get anything out of it, it's a process. I have to put the code in, or I have to have the master key to get in. The more recent one that I purchased is similar. The biggest thing that I wanted with both of them is something that I could actually secure into my house, because most modern houses have the 16-inch studs. So if you mount it into those studs, it's going to be difficult to move those. And the new one, there's a couple of processes that you can go to. You can there's mine has 5 buttons on it, and you create a pattern as to using it to enter it. You also have the ability to use, it looks just like a credit card. You press a button on the thing, you swipe it across, and it'll open up the safe. And then, of course, there's a master key just in case. Now, when you have those types of things, you also have to remember that that's the same as having instant access to the safe. So you have to know where your card is, your master key is, and make sure that you're not using a code that's easily used. My kids all know they know how to get into my phone and my iPad and my computer because I use the same codes. It's very simple for them to do that. On a safe, if you have any type of code, make sure that it's very different so that they don't have the ability to access that that safe. All right? Okay, well, I'll let you go ahead and take over for the rest.
Alrighty, well, thank you, Sid. I don't know about everyone else, but I am a kinesthetic learner, so I learn by doing. And so that it's, if you are like me, you are in luck. We have a demonstration coming up right after here, but let me just walk through you real quickly about what's up there at this demonstration. So up there, and maybe, Colorado Safes will give me a job after this, who knows. We're not advertising at all, but these are some vaults and some safes that we have curated essentially as some of the more popular models that are out there for firearm owners. And so we've got the HD 300 Quick Vault, the Hornady Rapid Safe, the Fort Knox Original, and these are essentially the same genre, if you will, of, you got to plug in and you got to push the buttons. And, I won't keep you all here too long, but feel free to play around with them. We actually have them set up over there to my right and to your left. The more biometric, fancy ones is the Vaultec safes here, and these are really fancy. They're sort of like the iPhone with the button. You press it and it lets you in. They're very, stealthy, and they look very not technologically advanced and whatnot. And they are also a little bit higher on the price range, and they're available for everyone to play around with over there. And so without further ado, I'm going to let everybody go and play with those safes to see if any of those interest you or may interest somebody that you know. One last time, I'd like to remind you all that, these are very expensive. I think for someone who may, have shooting as a sport or whatnot, may be willing to invest in some of these. But if they are not, there's definitely other things like cable locks, and there's other things like lock boxes that are accessible and available for all. And well, yes, please don't forget to make sure you sign in. Oh, yes. Yes, there is some recent research. I don't have, per se, the articles written up in front of me, but in the process of getting all of this presentation ready, we spoke with several people from CU Boulder, for example, or the Colorado University, or the University of Colorado. I'm from Georgia, excuse me. And there's research out there, obviously not done by the CDC, but there is a correlation nonetheless. Yeah. She knows all the facts. And, that reminds me, if you all have any questions after the fact, feel free to reach out to us. We are here and through email. We are very readily available to answer any questions you may have. Yes? Yes, I completely agree. Just the other day I saw on the news a 2-year-old boy in Florida, took his life on accident, right? And it happens a lot. Unfortunately, the coroner's report makes some technicalities, whereas anybody who takes their own life, whether that's an accident or not, with a firearm is considered suicide. So I don't know if there's anybody looking into that. Right. Mm-hmm. That's right. Yes. Yes. So free gun locks available, you know, with the police department and with health partners and whatnot. And yes, I mean, it raises the point that it's important, and that, you know, I guess after today, you all are very capable of playing the role of saying, are your firearms secured? Right? I know that I'm going to ask that to my friends back home for sure. I don't. Maddie, do you know? Yes. And, you know, if you do know someone like that, I know, Lee, you know this, they make safes much, much bigger than just the ones we carry. So, you know, point them towards Colorado Safes. It's actually one of the people we partnered with, and a couple of the shooting centers around town. They all carry larger safes than what we have today. Yes, here in the front.
You mentioned that El Paso County is right at the top.
Mm-hmm.
Then I think I heard someone wanted to say something about the military.
Mm-hmm.
What's the correlation? Or is there a correlation? Must be.
There definitely is. I mean, I think, unfortunately, our numbers of veteran suicides are just incredibly high, and that's for lots of different reasons. I think one is just the access to firearms, and also, you know, unfortunately, the numbers of mental health issues among that community. And just because we have Fort Carson and the Air Force Academy, and just the density of the military population here is really high. But yeah, I think it's like 30% around that people who attempt or die by suicide are either in the military or they're veterans.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Caitlin.
Lee, I want to hear from you. What convinced you to do, as a gun owner, what convinced you to change your ways?
Pure and simple, it was working with Dr. Eric Wallace and this team. And it took about 2 years for it to sink into this you know, thick head. Then it finally did. And yeah, the safes are expensive, but you know, if you buy a decent 9mm, it's going to be $500. I've got a Hornady safe like the one that was pictured, $170. And so now, when friends or relatives stop by the house with children, I'm not going, oh crap, where are all the guns? You know, and rounding them up and emptying them out and locking them up. So, but it was precisely the statistics that I was confronted with. That I mean, the most telling one to me is the fact that if you survive a suicide attempt, 90% of the time you're not going to successfully complete suicide later in your life. But if you're using a gun, very low probability you survive. Oh, and if you do, it may not be a very good life. And that's what we were confronted with. So they were right, putting time between people. Statistics. I'm a math guy.
If gun registration is required, where do you go to find out the registrations? That should be really easy for us to know how many people in El Paso County. What? Oh, it's not required? Really? Wow.
Yeah,
well, yes.
We have a Just Peace statement on gun violence that we wanted to put into the paper so that we could tell people in our community where we stand as a church. We'd already voted on it, and I sent the statement out to as many churches as we know, just to have people sign on, and I only had like one person want to sign on. It is expensive to publish this statement in the newspaper, but I'm going to encourage Just Peace to pressure our council and to find the money out of our budget so that we can publish this statement. And it has a number of things on it about registration and safe storage and all of that. So we as a congregation stand behind the work that you're doing, and thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you for having us. We really appreciate it. Well, if there are no other questions, yes. One last thing.
I just have two comments. One, I realize the main thrust of this is the concept of suicide prevention, and as a retired teacher, I know about suicide from students having done it or tried to do it. One succeeded. Yeah, anyway, that's beside the point. But I also want to bring up, which some people kind of hinted at, is the tragedy of a couple of young kids, mostly boys, probably, say to their friends, "Oh, my dad, I got to show you what my dad's got." And an accident happens. Either the son is killed or one of his friends might be killed or injured. So yeah, there's tragedy no matter how you look at it. And then the other point is it's a math thing. Lee can help, he's math, but I thought of this. In one of your slides, you said the average age is 44. Maybe you ought to change that and look up the stats and go to the median rather than the average. Because there is a difference for those of you that know enough math. There's a difference between saying median and average. So just for future reference, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One last comment. I know as a person on Medicare, I wasn't on the last questionnaire I got from Medicare, but a couple years ago I know I got one where Medicare said the generic question, do you have a gun in your home or do you have access to one, whatever. So yeah, it can apply not just to young people, but can apply to the rest of us, yeah.
Definitely. All right. Well, we are nearing up on noon here, and I want to make sure everyone has time to go on up and test these and maybe, text a family member in case, that's something that interests them. But I just wanted to thank you all once again for being here and listening, and for, just being advocates or future advocates. I'm volunteering you all for this type of work. Thank you. And one last thing, I'd like to thank all our project partners up here on the screen. As you can see, it's a lot of people, so this is a lot of hands that are trying to get you this information. But yes, feel free to grab some food. Feel free to bug Maddi over there.